The diner fell silent after the sound of a slap. 12-year-old Miguel's head snapped to the side as his backpack hit the grimy floor. A few coins rolled under the tables. "Watch where you're going, kid," barked Derek Thompson, 16, tall, and proud of the gold football ring that had just left a mark on Miguel's cheek. Fat Tony's Burger was the usual after-school hangout. Cheap food, loud music, and barely any adults paying attention. Derek ruled the place. For 2 years, he'd been bullying younger kids, taking their money, and humiliating anyone who couldn't fight back. Miguel slowly stood up and touched his face. His eyes were calm, not scared, something Derek should have noticed. But he didn't. He was too busy showing off for his laughing friends. "Sorry," Miguel said softly, bending to collect his scattered coins, the lunch money his grandmother had given him that morning, enough to last the week. "Sorry doesn't fix my sneakers," Derek sneered, kicking the coins away. "These cost more than your whole house." Laughter filled the room. A few phones were already recording. Another cruel moment for social media. No one noticed Miguel quietly sliding his phone under the table and pressing record. Behind the counter, the cashier, Dolores, looked worried. She knew Derek's father was a big name in town. Miguel was just a poor neighborhood kid. So, she looked away. "My dad says people like you should respect people like us," Derek said, shoving Miguel against the wall. "Maybe I should teach you that." Miguel didn't flinch. Instead, he met Derek's eyes and spoke calmly. "My dad taught me about respect too, and about consequences." Derek smirked. "Your dad? Please. You don't even have one, do you?" But his laughter stopped cold when Miguel said, "Vincenzo Torino. Maybe you've heard of him." The whole diner went quiet. Everyone had heard that name, the Torino family. People who ran the city from the shadows. Problems that vanished without explanation. Derek froze for a moment, his confidence slipping. But with cameras rolling, he forced a laugh. "You're lying," he said, though his voice wavered. Miguel just smiled, a calm, knowing smile that made him look much older than 12. "My dad always says family is sacred. And whoever messes with family finds out what that means." Then, without another word, Miguel picked up his phone, checked that the recording was saved, and walked away, leaving Derek in stunned silence. Miguel's movements were calm and deliberate, far too controlled for a boy who'd just been hit. The entire diner stayed silent. Derek finally looked around and began to realize he might have just made the worst mistake of his young, privileged life. If you're following this story about a bully who's about to learn what real consequences look like, make sure to subscribe, because what happens next will prove that some lessons in respect come at a very high price. Derek Thompson wasn't just another school bully. He came from a family that had always used money and influence to get their way. And in the 3 days after the incident at Fat Tony's Burger, he made it his mission to make Miguel's life miserable. "Hey, Torino!" Derek shouted down the hallway at Lincoln High, saying the name like an insult. "Your Mafia daddy can't save you here." Miguel didn't react. He just kept walking toward math class, ignoring the laughter behind him. His backpack had gone missing from his locker for the 3rd time that week, and someone had taped a cruel note to his desk. What Derek didn't know was that Miguel was quietly keeping track of everything, taking photos, writing down dates, and noting every witness. His father had always told him, documentation is power, and power used wisely becomes justice. At lunch, Miguel sat alone under the sun, speaking softly into his phone. "Thompson's testing limits again," he said. On the other end, his father's deep, calm voice replied, "Son, sometimes you let people like that tie their own noose. Keep watching. Keep learning." By Thursday, Derek pushed things even further. During gym class, he arranged for one of his friends to elbow Miguel in the stomach during basketball. The teacher, Coach Williams, well aware of Derek's father's influence, pretended not to notice. "Watch your step, Torino," Derek whispered as Miguel caught his breath on the floor. "Accidents happen when you don't know your place." But on Friday, Derek went too far. During recess, he and 4 of his friends cornered Miguel near the bathrooms, out of sight of the cameras. It was the perfect setup for another round of humiliation. "You know what, Torino?" Derek said, shoving him against the wall. "I'm sick of your Mafia stories. My dad knows everyone important in this town. If your family was dangerous, I'd have heard about it. Miguel met his eyes, calm as ever. Maybe you just don't know the right people to hear the right stories. Liar! Derek snapped. I bet your dad doesn't even exist, just like the rest of your fairy tales. Miguel's voice dropped low, steady, and unervingly mature. Be careful what you say next. Derek hesitated, then forced a smirk. Or what? You gonna call your imaginary daddy? Miguel smiled faintly and pulled out his phone. Actually, he said, that's a good idea. He pressed a button. A voice came through instantly, calm, deep, and unmistakable, with that familiar Italian accent the whole town had heard before on the news. Vincenzo Torino speaking. And just like that, the air around them changed. Miguel held the phone to his ear, calm as ever. Hi, Dad, he said. I'm here with Derek Thompson. You remember, the one I told you about. The color drained from Derek's face. That voice. Deep, composed, with a trace of an Italian accent. Everyone in town knew it. Ah, yes, the man on the phone replied slowly. The Thompson boy. Son of the real estate developer, right? Interesting family. A short pause. Then, quietly, give him the phone. Miguel handed it over. He wants to talk to you. Derek took the phone like it might explode in his hand. Hello. Hello, Derek, came the calm reply. I hear you and my son have had some misunderstandings. Sir, we were just... Let me explain something about family, the man interrupted gently. His voice wasn't angry, it was measured, deliberate, and that made it worse. In my world, family is sacred. When someone disrespects my family, it becomes my concern personally. Derek swallowed hard. Behind him, his friends started to back away quietly. I'm sure this was just a misunderstanding between young men, the voice continued. But you should know something. My son Miguel, he's polite, thoughtful, respectful. He doesn't look for trouble. A brief pause. On the other hand, I solve problems. That's what I do best. Yes, sir. I understand, Derek managed to whisper. Good, Vincenzo said. Now, give the phone back to my son. Derek handed the phone to Miguel as if it were on fire. Miguel spoke softly to his father in Italian, then ended the call. He enjoyed talking to you, Miguel said politely. Dad always says it's important to meet the families of my classmates. That night, Derek couldn't sleep. Every sound outside, a car door, a dog barking, the wind, made his heart race. He'd grown up hearing stories about the Torino family. Businesses that never failed. Rivals who vanished without a trace. Officials who never asked questions. And now, he had insulted the son of the man behind it all. Miguel, meanwhile, slept peacefully, the calm of someone who knew everything was falling into place exactly as planned. By Saturday morning, Derek's father got a phone call of his own. Mr. Thompson, the voice said smoothly, this is Vincenzo Torino. I hear our sons met at school. Perhaps we should meet in person. I have some ideas on how our boys can learn to get along. The meeting was set for Monday. Derek spent the entire weekend trapped in his own thoughts, replaying every insult, every shove, every cruel word. What would that meeting mean for his family? Each time Derek had tried to humiliate Miguel, he had only made him stronger. Beneath the boy's calm silence was a quiet, unshakable strength, the kind that grows in people who have learned to endure unfairness. What Derek didn't realize was that every act of cruelty was writing his own downfall. And by Monday, he would finally understand that some mistakes reach far beyond the schoolyard. When Monday came, it felt like a sentence being carried out. Derek Thompson walked into school pale and restless, his eyes shadowed from 2 sleepless nights. Every dark car that passed made his stomach tighten. Every unfamiliar face looked suspicious. Miguel, meanwhile, entered Lincoln High with his usual composure. He greeted teachers politely, placed his books neatly in his locker, and moved with quiet confidence, a boy completely at peace. Thompson. Principal Peterson's voice boomed down the hall. My office. No. Derek froze. His legs felt weak as he followed the principal down the corridor. His mind raced. Was this about the meeting? About Miguel? Or something worse? Inside the office, Peterson shut the door firmly. His face was serious, his tone measured. "Your father called," he began. "He mentioned that you and Miguel Torino have had disagreements. Care to explain what happened?" Derek's throat tightened. How could he explain that he had bullied, insulted, and assaulted the son of a man everyone in town respected, or feared, in equal measure? "It was just a stupid argument, sir," he stammered. "An argument that led to you hitting him?" Peterson interrupted, opening a folder. "Because we have witnesses, Derek. And we have videos." The color drained from Derek's face. Miguel hadn't just recorded that phone call, he'd documented everything. Every shove, every insult, every humiliation. Photos, timestamps, messages, all neatly organized, like evidence in a case file. "Look, Derek," Principal Peterson continued, his tone softening just slightly. "You're a bright student. But this," he turned the folder toward him, "this is serious." On the desk were printed screenshots of messages Derek had sent to his friends, mocking Miguel, bragging about the bullying. "This isn't just a school issue anymore," the principal said quietly. "This is targeted harassment against a minor." Derek sat there in silence, realizing for the first time that the real problem wasn't Miguel's father. It was Miguel himself, calm, patient, and far smarter than he ever imagined. The printed messages were laid out neatly in front of Principal Peterson, each one stamped with the exact date and time. Miguel had built a full report of Derek's behavior, complete with statements from classmates who had witnessed the bullying. "How did he even get these messages?" Derek whispered, horrified. Peterson looked up calmly. "Apparently, some of your friends decided to cooperate, once they learned who Miguel's father was." He closed the folder. "You're suspended for 3 days. And you'll apologize publicly." Derek walked out of the office in shock, his face drained of color. The power he once held over the hallways of Lincoln High was gone. Meanwhile, in the library, Miguel sat quietly working on his science project. But this wasn't just any school project. It was a detailed presentation on how technology can be used to document injustice. Miss Rodriguez, the librarian, approached softly. "Miguel, your Uncle Vincent is here to see you." Vincent Torino was not what anyone expected from someone with that last name. Tall, elegant, and impeccably dressed in a dark suit, he carried a leather briefcase and a calm air of authority. He looked more like a respected attorney than the relative of a man whispered about in every corner of the city. "Ciao, Nipote," Vincent said warmly, kissing Miguel's head. "Your father told me about your situation at school." "It's not a problem anymore, Zio Vincent," Miguel replied smoothly in Italian. "It's already being handled." Vincent smiled proudly. "Good. Your father wants you to remember that there's more than one way to resolve a conflict. Some lessons," he added gently, "are meant to educate." By then, news of Vincent Torino's visit was spreading quickly through the teachers' lounge. Everyone knew of the Torino family, though few ever said the name out loud. Some whispered about generous donations to school programs. Others recalled how certain disciplinary issues involving well-connected families simply vanished. Coach Williams, who had conveniently ignored the bullying incident in gym class, suddenly remembered possible irregularities during that same game. Dolores, the woman from Fat Tony's diner, called the school as well, offering to testify about what really happened. At 3:30 that afternoon, Richard Thompson's BMW pulled into the school parking lot. His face was tight, his grip on the steering wheel trembling slightly. Across the lot stood Vincenzo Torino, calm, composed, leaning casually against a polished black Cadillac, reading an Italian newspaper. "Mr. Thompson," Vincenzo greeted politely, folding the paper with precise care. "Thank you for coming." Richard tried to sound confident, his voice forced. "Mr. Torino, I'm sure we can handle this like civilized men." "Of course," Vincenzo replied with a courteous smile. "Let's talk in my office. It's more private." What happened inside that Cadillac stayed a mystery. But 20 minutes later, witnesses saw Richard Thompson step out, pale as a ghost, his hands shaking. He didn't speak to anyone. He simply walked straight toward the building, eyes fixed on the ground. "Pack your things," he whispered to Derek. "We're moving. End of the month." "Dad, what happened?" What did he say to you? Derek asked, his voice trembling. Richard glanced around nervously, pulling his son into a corner. He showed me photos, son. Photos of our house. Our offices. Your class schedule. He even knew where your mother shops, and the name of our dog's vet. Derek's stomach dropped. But he didn't threaten you, did he? Richard ran a shaky hand through his hair. He didn't need to. He just said that family means everything to him, and that he hopes I'll teach you the value of respecting other families. While Derek and his father were anxiously discussing what to do, Miguel was quietly going about his routine, stacking books neatly inside his locker, calm as ever. Before leaving school that day, Vincenzo had handed his son a small brown-wrapped package. Inside was a sleek high-end cell phone, not an ordinary one, and a short handwritten note in Italian. To document your education, with love, Zio Vincenzo. That evening, the Torino family sat together for dinner in their modest but spotless home. Miguel's mother, Isabella, served steaming lasagna, while Vincenzo scrolled through his emails on a tablet. "Dad," Miguel said evenly, "Derek Thompson is moving away at the end of the month." Vincenzo looked over his glasses, surprised. "And how do you know that?" Miguel replied, "Because I've learned that when you plant the right seeds, you can predict exactly how they'll grow." Isabella paused mid-motion, quietly impressed by her son's tone. Vincenzo closed his tablet, his eyes narrowing with a mix of pride and curiosity. "You're learning, Miguel," he said. "But remember, real power isn't about making people fear you. It's about earning respect for who you are, not for who your father is." Miguel nodded. "I know, Dad. That's why Derek still doesn't understand the most important part." "And what's that?" Vincenzo asked. Miguel's smile was calm, confident, not the grin of a child, but of someone who already understood strategy. "That I didn't collect all that evidence just to protect myself. I did it to protect whoever Derek was going to hurt next." Inside Miguel's binder was a detailed file. Names, dates, and statements from at least 8 other students Derek had bullied over the past 2 years, even recordings where Derek bragged about it. "Tomorrow," Miguel continued, "I'm giving everything to the student council. Not as the son of Vincenzo Torino, but as Miguel Torino, a student who refuses to stay silent." Vincenzo leaned back in his chair, quietly studying his 12-year-old son. What he saw went beyond intelligence. It was a sense of justice, calm, deliberate, and deeply moral. The next morning, Derek arrived at school pale and restless, only to find his transfer paperwork already processed. But that wasn't the worst of it. In the auditorium, the student council was setting up a presentation titled "Toxic Behavior at Lincoln High." Derek's name appeared on nearly every slide. Miguel had done more than clear his own name. He had exposed a pattern that no one could ignore. Every insult, every assault, every message was laid out in order, proof that documentation, in the right hands, is power. By the time Derek realized what had happened, it was too late. He hadn't just lost the fight. He'd been completely outsmarted by a boy whose quiet strength came not from revenge, but from justice. Miguel had turned pain into purpose. Every insult, every wound had become part of a larger strategy. His suffering had taught him something powerful: how to turn humiliation into learning and revenge into justice. While Derek packed his bags for a move he hadn't chosen, Miguel was preparing something far bigger than anyone imagined. Something that would not only change his life, but also give dozens of silent students a voice. What no one knew yet was that his campaign against bullying was only the beginning of a much larger mission, one that would prove that wisdom doesn't depend on age, and that true leadership can rise from the most unexpected places. That Thursday morning, the Lincoln High auditorium was filled to capacity. Students, teachers, parents, and even local reporters had gathered after hearing rumors about a powerful student-led presentation. When Miguel walked onto the stage, the room fell quiet. He carried a small laptop and a projector, dressed neatly in his ironed school uniform. Every movement was calm, deliberate, the quiet confidence of someone who had studied leadership not from books, but from watching his father in real life. He stood at the podium and spoke into the microphone, his voice clear and steady. "My name is Miguel Torino," he began, "and today I'll be presenting a project about patterns of toxic behavior in our school environment." It wasn't the voice of a frightened 12-year-old, it was the voice of someone far more mature, measured, and determined. In the third row sat Derek Thompson, forced by the principal to attend as part of his suspension. His palms were sweaty, his breathing shallow. He watched Miguel connect the projector with his usual precision, fearing what might come next. The first image appeared on the screen, a detailed timeline of bullying incidents from the past 2 years. The audience gasped in unison. Each case was carefully labeled by date, aggressor, and victim. For the past 24 months, Miguel continued, I've documented 47 cases of bullying, physical aggression, and verbal abuse here at Lincoln High. The same pattern repeats itself, older, wealthier students targeting those younger or from less privileged backgrounds. Then, Derek's worst fear came true. His name flashed across the screen, marked in red, appearing again and again. Miguel clicked to the next slide. This video shows Derek Thompson assaulting 11-year-old Kevin Martinez in September 2023. A shaky but clear recording appeared, Derek shoving a smaller boy against the lockers and taking his lunch money. The crowd murmured. Some gasped. Next slide. Here's Derek publicly mocking Lisa Chun for her English accent last October. This time, laughter from the crowd in the video echoed painfully across the silent room as Derek was shown mimicking Lisa's voice, surrounded by classmates cheering him on. With each clip, each screenshot, Derek sank deeper into his seat. Around him, people stared, parents in disbelief, students whispering, teachers frozen. Miguel continued calmly, almost clinically. Here are text messages where Derek Thompson bragged about his actions. The screen displayed chat screenshots. Taught another brat not to cross me. These kids need to know who runs this place. In the front row, Derek's mother covered her face with her hands. Her son's cruelty, once hidden behind charm and privilege, was now projected in front of the entire community. Richard Thompson sat frozen in his chair, his face drained of color. He finally understood, this wasn't just a school issue anymore. It was a full public reckoning. But Miguel wasn't finished. What I've learned through this investigation, he continued, his tone calm and precise like a seasoned prosecutor, is that this behavior wasn't random. It was systematic, coordinated, and worse, deliberately ignored by people who should have stopped it. The next slide appeared on the screen, a series of emails between Derek and several other students. They showed them planning specific acts of humiliation against certain classmates, complete with lists of names and methods to use on each target. Then Miguel turned his gaze to the gym teacher. Coach Williams, he said firmly, you witnessed at least 12 assaults during your classes. You did nothing. I have witnesses and video recordings to prove it. A few gasps echoed through the room. Williams stood up, ready to defend himself, but then Miguel pressed play. The projector displayed footage from the school's own gym security cameras, showing exactly what he described, students being pushed, hit, and mocked, while the coach stood by pretending not to notice. The teacher slowly sat down, head bowed. Miguel moved on. Dolores Santos, employee at Fat Tony's Burger, he said, turning to face the crowd. You said on record that you knew Derek was violent, but you stayed silent because of who his father is. He tapped a key, and her voice filled the auditorium speakers. Look, I know the Thompson kid is trouble, but his dad's connected. Better not get involved. The room went dead quiet. Derek tried to leave, but when he looked toward the doors, he froze. Vincenzo Torino, Miguel's father, had quietly entered the auditorium minutes earlier. He stood calmly near the main exit, not to intimidate, but to watch his son's moment of truth. 2 men in discreet suits stood near the side doors, ensuring the event went uninterrupted. Then came the final blow. Miguel took a deep breath. Now we come to last Monday's incident at Fat Tony's Burger, he said, when Derek Thompson physically assaulted me in front of several witnesses. A video began to play, the same one recorded by a student named Tommy. Every slap, every cruel word, every second of humiliation was displayed in crystal clarity. No one looked away. But then Miguel did something no one expected. He paused the video at the moment Derek struck him and turned toward the audience. Do you know what I felt when that happened? He asked quietly. It wasn't anger. It was sadness. Because in that moment, I realized Derek Thompson isn't just a bully. He's the result of a system that teaches some children that power gives them the right to dehumanize others. You could hear a pin drop. Derek sat shaking, tears streaming down his face. His mother, seated in the front row, reached for him but couldn't find the words. Miguel continued, his voice calm but unyielding. This presentation isn't really about Derek Thompson. It's about all of us, about how our community decides who deserves protection, the powerful or the powerless. He clicked to the final slide. The screen filled with photos, the faces of 23 children, ages 10 to 14. Under each photo was a name. These were Derek's victims. For 2 years, Miguel said softly, Derek Thompson humiliated, threatened, and hurt these students. He stole from at least 15 of them. He destroyed the confidence of others. And he was allowed to do it because adults stayed silent, because the Thompson name carried weight. No one spoke. No one moved. Derek collapsed in his seat, sobbing openly, while his mother held him, her own face wet with tears. The silence that followed wasn't just shock, it was the sound of a community realizing its own guilt. Richard Thompson sat frozen, eyes fixed on the floor. He knew it, the Thompson name, once powerful and respected, was finished. Miguel closed his laptop and looked at the audience. My proposal is simple, he said. Zero tolerance for bullying, no matter who you are. Every teacher trained to recognize and report abuse. And most importantly, real support for students who've suffered in silence for too long. The reaction was immediate. The entire auditorium rose to its feet. Applause thundered through the room. Parents wiped their eyes, teachers nodded with pride, and students cheered. Miguel had taken his own humiliation and turned it into something far greater, a movement for change. Meanwhile, Derek tried to hide behind his mother, but the cameras caught everything. Within hours, the videos would spread online. By evening, his face was everywhere, not as the popular kid he once was, but as the bully who broke down when faced with the truth. As the Thompsons slipped quietly out of the building, Miguel stepped down from the stage. Dozens of classmates and parents surrounded him, shaking his hand, thanking him. From the back of the hall, Vincenzo Torino watched in silence, a faint, proud smile on his face. His son had learned a lesson far more powerful than revenge, the art of justice. Derek, however, had learned one of life's harshest truths. When you choose to humiliate others, you risk discovering that the person you thought was weak might be stronger than you ever imagined. And sometimes, the pain of shame leaves a scar deeper than any wound. The real question wasn't whether Derek would recover from this public fall, but whether he'd ever change. 3 months later, Lincoln High School was a different place. Posters promoting respect lined the halls. Teachers underwent new training. Students finally spoke up without fear. At the center of it all was Miguel Torino, now president of the Student Council, elected unanimously. His Document to Protect initiative had spread to hundreds of schools across the country, drawing national attention. As for Derek, his family had quietly moved out of state. But the internet doesn't forget. Every college he applied to found the videos. Every job lead vanished after one quick search of his name. His past followed him like a shadow. Miguel's story, on the other hand, reached far beyond Lincoln High. When CNN interviewed him for a documentary on bullying, he spoke calmly and with the same quiet confidence that had silenced an entire auditorium. My dad always said, Miguel told the reporter, the best revenge is success. I didn't ruin Derek Thompson's life. I just showed the world who he really was. Months later, Vincenzo sat proudly in the front row at Miguel's graduation. His son received 3 honors: academic excellence, community leadership, and civil courage. Across the country, in another state, Derek watched the ceremony on YouTube under a fake username. No one at his new school knew his story. But every time he saw someone being pushed around, he heard Miguel's voice in his mind. Family is sacred. He finally understood. Respect isn't inherited, it's earned. And Miguel proved that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes, they wear school uniforms and carry backpacks, reminding us that dignity has no age, and justice doesn't wait for anyone to grow up.